Hey everybody. So for this week, I'm asking you to read a couple of more web pages on Spanish Texas. The reason I'm doing that, and I said it once before, but I'll say it again, the textbook I used to read went from like 20 bucks to 50 bucks, which was ridiculous because it's the same exact textbook. So I figured the Spanish period I could cover basically for free by sending you to these links. But you do have some reading to do. And the first reading that you're going to do in books is Empire of the Summer Moon, which is a classic account of the Comanche in Texas. It's written by Sam Gwynn. I think one of the things, he's from Dallas. One of the real advantages of this book is he's not a historian, a classic historian, so he's actually a writer. It's much better written than a lot of history books that you'll read, especially ones written by professors, sad to say. And the reason I'm assigning this to you in the big picture here is the Comanche tribe. And there were 12 bands of Comanche. There was never one overall Comanche tribe, and Gwen's going to explain this. But let me put it like this. The Comanche people, or at least a couple of bands of the Comanche people, dominated what's now Texas, especially the area from San Antonio all the way into the Panhandle, West Texas, all the way to El Paso, into Mexico as well, what's now Mexico. They dominated this area. And just to extend it beyond Texas history, the Comanche dominated eastern New Mexico, what's now Oklahoma, Kansas. They dominated this area of North America from the 1720s until about the 1870s, which is pretty incredible. And I know for a lot of you all, you think, yeah, history doesn't pertain to me. It's abstract. It's over there. Why do I have to take this? But one of the things you might want to think about it is the Comanche dominated an area that my grandmother's mother lived in. My grandmother's mother and my grandmother's mother had to fear the Comanche. In fact, I had a great uncle. My family on my mom's side, the Flanagan side, grew up around Llano. This guy was scalped, and he survived being scalped, which I didn't know was possible. I think it's pretty rare. So when you're looking at Texas history from about the 1720s to about the 1870s, the most powerful group in Texas are the Comanche, without a doubt. Now, to talk about the Spanish period, and remember the Spanish dominate or they ruled Texas, they have sovereignty over Texas from, let's say, 1492 when Columbus arrives until 1821. Then 1821, 1836, it's Mexico, and then Texas, and then the United States. But the point I want to make before I get too deep in the weeds here is the Comanche totally dominated the Spanish in Texas. Usually the story of European and Indian encounter, or European and Native encounters, are that the Europeans come to dominate the Native Americans, the Indians. Sometimes this is because of force. Often it's due to disease. Disease is the real wild card in the history of Native peoples in the New World, because disease always undermined the population of Indian groups. Whenever there was encounters between people of European descent and Native groups, the Native groups were always the big loser in that exchange. So to go back to the Comanche, though, the Comanche managed to dominate what's now Texas, especially during the Spanish period and into the Mexican period and into the early Anglo period as well. They were the most powerful people in what's now Texas. And they dominated a big chunk of North America. They had an empire. That's why the title of the book is Empire of the Summer Moon. When you think of the United States, or when we think of the United States, the U.S. is so powerful that it's hard to think that in what's now the lower 48 states that there was a separate empire that took Americans almost half a century to defeat, but that was the case. And for the period of the course that you're studying, the Spanish never defeated the Comanche. The Comanche were much more powerful than the Spanish. The Spanish always had trouble settling Texas. They never had many soldiers in Texas. The Comanche outnumbered the Spanish by maybe 50 to 1. And the other thing is the Comanche also, because of the fur trade, was receiving arms from the French who were in Louisiana. And when you listen to my podcast for this week, you'll understand how significant it was, the French that were next door in Louisiana. So what happens is the Comanches are the most important force in Texas for almost well over 100 years. So that's why I'm having you read the book. Now, the portion that you're reading for next week is the part of the book where Gwen goes and does some background on the Spanish period. Most of the book is about Texas during from the 1840s until the final suppression of the Comanche in the 1880s, when they were forced into Oklahoma. But Gwen does give some background into the Comanche coming into Texas and their encounters with the Spanish. Now, to give you a little bit of an orientation into the book, don't get too lost in the details of the book. Okay, that'll drive you crazy. What I find really interesting about it, and here's the big picture. Just when you read the book, have a sense of how the Comanche and the Spanish interacted. And the podcast, I think, will help in this regard. And how the Comanche overpowered the Spanish. Don't get too lost in the details of the Spanish governors. If there's someone I'm going to test you on, I will signal you about that, okay? So just get a sense of the overall. Now, the Spanish period, really the most important incident that happens in the Spanish period is when the Comanche and their Norteño allies go to the San Saba mission, which is north and west of San Antonio, and absolutely wipe it out. I'm not going to go into detail on that in this podcast because I talk about it in the podcast I'm assigning for this week. So what you're looking for, here's the big picture in the Gwen book. The Comanche, who they are, why they were so powerful, the significance of the horse to the Comanche, absolutely essential. The Comanche were really insignificant until they gained access to the horse, which the Spanish had brought with them into the Americas. Then the Comanche became one of the most powerful light cavalry in all of world history. So they go from kind of nothing to this very, very powerful horse because they have access. This powerful force because they have access to the horse. So keep your eye on the big picture, the rise of the Comanche coming into Spanish Texas. I'm very, very interested in the defeat of the Spanish at the San Saba mission. That is a big deal to me because one of the ways to think about the power of the Comanche is that they basically stopped Spanish settlement in its tracks. The Spanish never really get north or west of San Antonio because the Comanche just say no. The Comanche won't let them. And in fact, after San Saba, there was some talk about the Spanish even leaving San Antonio and going back into what's now central Mexico. But because of an accident of geography, that San Antonio was just out of what the Comanche considered their territory, the Comancheria, the Spanish ended up staying in San Antonio. So when you're reading Gwen, these are the big picture items I want you to take to remember as you read it. Keep the big picture in mind. The importance of the Comanche, who they were, why they became powerful, their interactions with the Spanish, and their dominance of the Spanish. And the readings that you're doing this week are supplemented by the podcast. So you might want to listen to the podcast first, or if you do the reading first, I think they'll make a lot more sense after you listen to the podcast.